Hey everybody, welcome to tonight's live. I'm Dr. Tammy. I'm a medical doctor and I freak everybody out with things that they might not know. So I'm going to jump right in tonight. And thank you for being here, everybody. I'm so excited. This is going to be a very timely live because we are at the holidays. Oh, thank you. I am flipping now. I am. Okay. Yay. Thank you. So it is the holidays. And if you saw my teaser video, I had two huge plates of cookies from one of our favorite bakeries, Rick's Bakery here in Northwest Arkansas. And they are so delicious. And so you can go back and look at my teaser video. But I have to be really honest that I was holding those cookies and I was talking about sugar cravings. And I had to eat a couple cookies and I was like, oh my gosh, they were like in my mouth before I even realized it. And so, one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is the reasons that you do that. Because if you understand the reasons that you do it, you might not do it, right? And we all know that sugar is bad for you. So, I'm not going to tell you all the reasons that refined sugars are bad for you. And I will say that I am not talking about natural sugars in fruit or carbs in fruit or vegetables. I'm just going to be talking about the white refined sugar, flour, the things that we know are going to raise our blood sugar rapidly and make us feel like crap, honestly. So that's what I'm talking about tonight. And there are some things that I want to share with you because I'm always that one that's like those aha moments, like, oh, I didn't know that. That's kind of crazy. So I'm going to start with some of those, some places that you might not expect that some of your sugar cravings are coming from. And so I want to kind of go through some of those things, and then I want to talk about what you can do about it. The premise of everything that I do to share is to educate and empower you. So, not just to teach you about stuff, but to empower you to make different choices, because when you know better, you can do better. And most of the time, we're just walking around sort of blindly making these decisions that are sort of being made for us by our hormones and our cravings. I always say that the cravings speak louder, the hormones speak louder than the willpower. So, if you have these cravings, it's probably your hormones. Well, not probably, remember you're talking to the hormone queen, right? But you have to understand what's going on so that you can combat that, right? Because what is the end point? What's the thing we're scared of? We're scared of diabetes, and 1 in 3 adults in the US are pre-diabetic, and we are moving towards just almost complete diabetic shock in our culture. I mean, you look around, you look at old videos from the 50s, and people were in those skinny pencil pants. And now you look around and it was the exception to be like Aunt B on, Andy Griffith. It was the exception to be overweight back then. And now it's the exception to be thin. And so it's not just about, your looks. It is about sugar is toxic. And I'm not talking about natural sugars again, but sugar is toxic and it will age you. There's something called glycation that happens in the matrix of the cells in the skin, and it literally melts them. So it can also cause dementia because the new science that we have about dementia in the brain and brain fog, which can be dementia, but brain fog is a type 3 diabetes of the brain in the brain. So if you are foggy, then that could well be a sugar utilization problem in your brain. So type 1 diabetes is when you don't make insulin. Type 2 is when your insulin doesn't work right. And type 3 is the diabetes of the brain, where your brain can't utilize sugar correctly. So some places that you might not be familiar with that could be causing some of your sugar craving problems are your liver, and I'm going to explain that tonight. Your genetics, you probably would have guessed that, but we don't want to blame our genetics. We want to understand our genetics, right? And also, of course, perimenopause and menopause are the times when things really start to shift. There are adrenal problems. And so your adrenals are the little hormones that regulate stress and cortisol and adrenaline. So if you're stressed, I mean, it was end of day and I was like trying to rush out of there and finish up charting. So that's part of what made me grab those cookies. Plus, my sugar was really low because I hadn't eaten since lunch. So that gives me a good point to start in. I'm going to draw some pictures on the board. And this is a new tea for me tonight. Usually I do my dandelion tea because it's so good for the liver. But this is a kava tea and it's got cinnamon in it. And cinnamon is really good for your blood sugar. So a lot of times people who are struggling with diabetes or prediabetes will do cinnamon. And people probably wonder why I always drink tea on these lives. I'm probably going to become famous for my tea. And it's just because I talk so much that I do start to get a little bit hoarse after talking so much. Okay, so we're going to the board now. Let's make sure you can see it. Oh, there we are. Okay. When I do this mirror flip, it's always kind of weird. Will you guys put in the comments, you see everything okay? Yes. Yes, yes. You see me? Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, and my moderator, fiance, a wonderful man, just reminded me if you would tap the screen, that sends me some little hearts and it lets the algorithm know that we're talking about some cool stuff. But you know, it kind of makes them notice. And I think there's some really cool messages here. So if you think there's cool messages here too, and you're learning cool stuff, then just tap the screen and show some love and or the likes or whatever you do on the things or whatever. Oh, and share the video. I think there's a way to share. I think it's a little arrow button. So if you're on here and you share it, it invites more people in. So that's cool if you would do that too. Okay. So anyway, down to business. What is this graph? I always draw graphs. So what do you do with Dr. Tammy's graphs? Okay, well, we got to figure out what's going on here. So this graph is the days or the hours during a day. And so this is 7 a.m. all the way till 10 at night. And that's usually most people's schedule. Okay. So the reason I talk about this is I have already drawn in blood sugar. And your blood sugar spikes every time you eat. So at breakfast, you have a blood sugar spike here. And then around lunch, you have another spike. And then maybe you snack at around 3. And then here at dinner, you have another spike. Okay. So the reason I want you to see this is that as we move here with these spikes, you need to understand that I have some diabetes. Okay, been type 2 for 8 years. Okay, so thank you, Addison and Vincent. This is really relevant if you have diabetes because what's happening in the cell, and I'm going to draw another picture in a minute about how blood sugar is utilized and how it goes into the cell. Okay, so the red that I'm going to draw, so the green is glucose or sugar, okay? And the red that I'm going to draw here is insulin, okay? And I'm going to explain what insulin is in just a minute. Most people know insulin by diabetes, and people who are diabetics take insulin. So what happens is insulin is your body's hormone that lowers your blood sugar. Because if sugar is allowed to sit in the arteries in the bloodstream for too long, you can start to have what's a very corrosive environment. And sugar will start to literally, like little hack axes in the arteries, like little pick axes, will actually dig little holes in your arteries. And that is the reason why diabetics have amputations, heart disease, kidney disease, because their arteries are literally being melted from the inside. And just like your skin, the glycation process, it's breaking down the cellular structure in your skin. It breaks down the cellular structure in your arteries as well. And so you can get neuropathy because you need that blood flow to the nerves. And you can have all the complications that we know that diabetics have, right? Even the brain. So that sugar sitting in there is not good. So insulin's job is to move the sugar out of the bloodstream. And where does it move it? It moves it into the cell. But I want to show you first what happens when you have a high glucose or sugar load. And I also want to mention that people wake up with high blood sugar sometimes, And there are diabetics who will say, I don't understand because I'm fasting, or people will come into my clinic fasting and their blood sugar will be high. And they're like, I didn't eat anything. Here's the fascinating thing, and I'm going to tie in with the liver here, and I'm going to do more about the liver in just a minute. But what's the liver got to do with your blood sugar? The liver has a process in it called gluconeogenesis, and you don't need to know that word. It's a long, fancy word that makes me look smart, but it's just a big word. Glucose means sugar, neo means new, and genesis means create. So gluconeogenesis means that your liver can make sugar. Your liver can make fats too. Your liver makes cholesterol. Your liver makes sugar. And so the reason for that is if you are ever in starvation mode, which is why we can't lose weight sometimes by cutting calories so much, because your liver goes, whoa, I'll just make some sugar. So it's not dependent on the sugar that you eat all the time because your body knows how to make its own sugar. So that's something that we can work with, or we can work against, or you can work against us, right? Okay, so some people wake up with high blood sugar, and if things aren't working properly, because it can also be what you ate the night before stimulated your liver to make sugar. So the pancreas is the organ that makes your insulin, and the pancreas secretes the insulin. So I'm going to do insulin in red. And so what insulin does is it chases the sugar, it's pulling it out of the bloodstream and pulls it down. And then if you have good insulin sensitivity, it keeps the sugar from going too high. So if you have a lot of insulin and the insulin's not working properly, it will pull that sugar down. And now when you go below this line, now you have something called hypoglycemia, or low blood sugar. And I have a lot of people tell me when they are moving from pre-diabetes into diabetes, meaning you're not regulating your sugar enough or good, then you'll have low blood sugar. What happens with low blood sugar? You feel tired, you feel shaky. And Marie says, I have people fight over starvation mode. I think I'm gaining weight because I'm not eating enough. So yeah, Marie, so I'll come back to that, but not eating enough is a factor of what you're eating, because people want to count calories, but calories are just a unit of energy. So the calories or the units of energy in an apple are different from the calories or the units of energy in pizza. So it really is important that when we're talking calories or eating enough, we often think of calories as a unit of mass, like it's weight. It's like what it is. It's not a unit of energy. So when you think of a unit of energy, not eating enough might mean that you're not eating enough of what we call regular food, right? So eating enough, if you are eating more of the right stuff that has good energy for your body, or what we call nutrient dense, then yes, absolutely, because it is those things in those foods that have the nutrients that are so important. So okay, so I don't know if that answered that question. Please send that question back through if I didn't answer that good enough. But okay, so anyway, low blood sugar happens right here. So if that glucose is pulled down here, now you have what's called low blood sugar, and your sugar's down here, right? Well, what happens when you have low blood sugar? You crave sugar. It is chemistry. It is wired into our primitive little reptilian brain stem to tell you that when your sugar is low, you freaking crave sugar. And I've had insulin resistance my whole life because PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome, is a estrogen dominance and a progesterone deficiency. Now, why am I saying that? I'm saying that because insulin resistance is a part of that whole chemistry that happens. And so without getting too complicated in that, if you guys want to know more about that, you can put that in the chat about PCOS and insulin resistance. But I tend to have low blood sugar to the extent fasting is really difficult for me. Blue Eye Shorty says, I take my metformin twice a day. I wake up 2 to 3 nights, but when I'm starving. Okay, so yeah, so I'll talk about medications here in a little bit. Metformin is talk about that. So I promise I'll get back to that question. But so when you drop here and you start craving sugar, it can make a person mean because there's this that happens that is part of our primitive DNA. I mean, it is just like it's survival. It is just like you have to eat sugar. I mean, there are times my insulin resistance really kicks up to the I don't know, to the degree that I swear I could eat a whole bag of gummy bears sometimes. I mean, it's just like, or, that feeling where you just don't want a piece of cake. You want the whole, because that is your brain talking to you. And that's when it becomes so difficult to deal with the sugar cravings. And so knowledge is power. So I just want you guys to understand. I'm going to tell you some things that you can do about that. But this is hormonal, and this is your chemistry that's doing this. I was told insulin resistance, no appetite, but I will kill for chocolate. Chocolate hummus. I've never heard of chocolate hummus. I've heard of chocolate gravy on biscuits. That's crazy. I'm going to look that up. That's fun. And I eat sugar daily. Yeah, I mean it's thing, right? Okay, so when the sugar drops here, you start craving it. And the problem is that when you start craving it, you tend to eat a lot of sugar. Here's the whole cake that you're eating, right? And now you have this sugar spike. And hopefully insulin will come to the rescue and pull it down before it gets too bad. And now you're doing this kind of thing and it's way down here. And then your blood sugar is really low. And then you're craving it again and sugars come down and now you're low down here and you crave it again. And you're just doing this all day long. So how can you prevent that? One of the things is you cannot eat a lot of sugar here in the morning. That's one of the first things. I mean by that, this is where intermittent fasting comes in, which is one of the ways that I truly, truly recommend that if you want to lose weight. I mean, this, sugar storage and gaining weight is all part of this. This isn't a lose weight talk, but it is about your health and how you use your utilization of your sugar. And I always say that weight loss is a side effect of a healthy hormone system. Marie says, yeah, when I had gestational diabetes, I learned no fruit in the morning. Yeah, absolutely. And so what are we taught to do? We are taught to have cereal for breakfast. And did you know that Raisin Bran is one of the highest sugar content cereals? You think you're doing something healthy? Raisins have a ton of sugar in them. They add sugar to it. I mean, it's just like sugar laden. I mean, it is, and it's just nuts how much sugar they put in things. Kate says metformin take makes me sick. Okay, when I talk about the meds here in a little bit, I'll talk about why metformin does that. Is 1 or 2 cups of black coffee impact on insulin? Usually not. If you don't have sugar in there, it shouldn't. And there is a guy, I actually did an interview with him. If you want to look that up, it's like a crazy amount of views on that. And natural sweeteners. Okay, I'm going to talk about that in just a minute too. But his name is Dave Asprey, and he is the Bulletproof Coffee guy. And he does a lot of intermittent fasting, and he actually talks about putting MCT oil, which is great for brain fog and dementia and memory stuff, in your black coffee and doing just the black coffee and the MCT oil. When you're hungry, it's difficult. Yeah. Yeah, because the sugar cravings. Yeah, so it is a thing. Yes, MCT oil, medium chain triglycerides. So it's a refined coconut oil, basically, but they extract some of the protein out of it. So it's just a more pure version of coconut oil. So yeah, and his whole stuff is the bulletproof coffee stuff. And I was never a coffee drinker, but I did his program for probably about 3 months, and I kind of learned to like coffee okay, which is good because there's a lot of different, recipes and stuff or sweets that have coffee in it. So I kind of learned to coffee taste. So anyway, that's a thing. Okay, so if you want to do this and not have these sugar spikes so much, we can just take that sugar out in the morning and then hopefully during the day, and then not have sugar late at night. This is happening, but hopefully you'll get a little bit more balance here. So this starts to look a little bit more reasonable, like what we would call normal. So that's one of the things you can do is an intermittent fasting just means that you're eating only during a certain window. And Yonder says you have to coach them to add better foods, not. Yes, absolutely. And that's what I was saying earlier about some people are told they're not consuming enough calories to lose weight. And that's basically you're not consuming enough of the right kinds of food, which are fiber and things that can slow down your glycemic index and give you the right nutrition to fuel your body. Okay, so I'm going to take this out and I'm going to draw a different picture. And this is one of my favorite pictures. I do this all the time in clinic to explain insulin to people. And so this is a blood vessel. I'll make it red for blood, right? And here is the bottom of the blood vessel. So the blood is flowing through the blood vessel that way. Okay. And let's say you eat a piece of pie, and I'm going to really harp heavy on consuming sugar in your, Marie says I drink coffee with almond milk, dinner at night, protein, veggies, and weight is insane. Of dairy is, or almond, almond milk's not dairy, but those, you have to watch those almond milks because like rice milk and stuff can have a lot of sugar in it. So, okay. So this is your blood vessels. So let's say you just drank some Kool-Aid. Do you know how much Kool-Aid or how many sugar grams are in like a soda or something like that? It is absolutely nuts. If you drink, let's say, if you had this much, a cup, what is that, like maybe 8 ounces, some sort of drink like Coke or Sprite or something like that, literally half of this mug is sugar. I mean, if you've ever made Kool-Aid back in the day, I mean, it's just like 2 cups of sugar to a quart. It is nuts. And I'm going to tell you why that is so bad here in just a second. But let's say some Coke or some Kool-Aid or ate a piece of pie. So here is sugar in your bloodstream. And remember, you can't leave sugar in the bloodstream because it will start jabbing away at your arteries. And then also over time, those kind of holes become like divots in your arteries. And now calcium can deposit in here. And now just like lung stuff starts building up in here. And it's really irritating. So then you start getting swelling and inflammation. And before you know it, you have a big blockage here. And that's your heart attacks and strokes and all the bad things that can happen, right? So sugar in your bloodstream is not good. So what happens? Well, your body says that's not a good thing. So it secretes a hormone called insulin. And remember, we were doing the spikes and the insulin spikes and everything. So insulin is secreted. Then it goes in here and it latches onto the sugar molecule and it moves it out into the fat or the muscle. So if you've ever had any biology, you kind of know it under a microscope, but muscle fibers kind of look like strands like that, and fat cells usually look like globules. So this is one little hint too that I tell people is when you eat a lot of sugar and insulin moves it out, you have 2 choices. The insulin can move the sugar into the fat cells or into the muscle. Well, you can imagine if it moves the sugar into the muscle, you can use that for immediate use, right? And that's why bodybuilders will carb load. They'll eat sweets or whatever, or drink Gatorade or whatever, and then they'll exercise because the sugar goes to the muscle and they'll burn it, and they can increase their muscle size by having that extra boost to the muscles, basically. So that if it doesn't go to the muscle, then it's going to go to the fat. Well, when does it go to the fat? It goes to the fat when you're not active. So if you eat a piece of pie and then you go lay down, it's like, Thanksgiving or Christmas, and you eat those sweets and then you want to go take a nap. One of the biggest things that you could actually, best things that you take a walk. maybe you're not somebody who works out a lot, but just to go be active for a minute, because you will train your body to put the sugar into the muscle. So that's really important. So as it moves this sugar out, what's happening now is that if you consume a lot of sugar, and there are a lot of sugar molecules in here, insulin can become overworked. Your pancreas can become overworked making insulin. And then it, like any other organ that's overworked, it can start to be stressed or strained. And then it starts just going, how much insulin am I going to have to secrete? How much insulin am I going to have to push out to chase all that sugar? And then also what happens is genetics, like this lock and key that this insulin has to attach on the sugar molecule. Sometimes these don't work in people very well. So if you have a genetic propensity, people in your family have had diabetes, or you have an ethnicity that's prone to diabetes, then your insulin doesn't work as well. And it's just all the sugar just stays floating in here. So there's one thing that you can do, and I like to mention this while I'm talking about this, called, you could check your blood sugar levels fasting in the morning. And then there's criteria that if it's a certain level, you call that a diabetic, right? But there's a test that you can do, a blood test called a hemoglobin A1C. You guys heard about that. And diabetics track this. And what is a hemoglobin A1C? A hemoglobin A1C is your red blood cells. Let's choose some red here. Your red blood cells that float around in your bloodstream are made about every 3 months. And when you make new red blood cells, the red blood cells actually have these sugar molecules on it. And that's what a hemoglobin A1C is. So a hemoglobin A1C is a measurement of what your blood sugar has been doing over the last 3 months. Because if a doctor just checks your blood sugar in one spot check, it might be okay, or it might be a little bit high. So what we do is we track this hemoglobin A1C to see if into the danger zone. And this usually should be around 5 or less. So if your A1C is really high, like 7, or I've seen really high ones, but if it's like up from, oh my gosh, Kate says A1C was 11.4. Yeah. So yeah, and most people actually are diabetic maybe 5 to 10 years before they even know it, or pre-diabetic. Yeah, so that can be really crazy. So an A1C like that, you are at risk of diabetic comas, you're of neuropathy, vascular disease, all sorts of things. So, and Disa says, hi from Texas. Hello. Hello from Arkansas. And thanks for little hello. Okay. Marco says I'm type 1 diabetic. Yeah. So that's a whole different ball game. So people who are type 1 diabetics have to take insulin, because insulin doesn't work at all. Your own natural production isn't even present, the cells that make insulin from the pancreas. So you have to take insulin. And what to diabetes is, with insulin resistance, you keep making more and more and more insulin. It's not working. The sugar is just sitting in here. And so that's when we call it resistant. So when it's not working. So want all of this sugar out of there, not all of it, because you don't want to get low blood sugar, but we want a bloodstream with red blood cells and just kind of a little bit of sugar just to brain and all that going. Michaela says, my mom, late onset juvenile. Yeah. So, yeah, the cells they're talking about, the cells of Langerhans in the pancreas, those are the cells that make your insulin. So juvenile is usually when you're young, and I'm just know that are commenting, but for those who don't, when you're young, juvenile diabetes is when you like can't make insulin. And so there's a lot of studies for stem cells and diabetes and pancreas. So I think that we're moving towards a lot of things that we can help. Is it true you can avoid being diabetic? There are certain things. Yes, absolutely. If you're type 2 diabetic, now type 1 is a little bit different. Low carb, keto, avoiding, the simple sugars. Yeah, so diabetes is nothing to mess around with, but there definitely are, and I'm going to talk about some of those things here in just a minute. Okay, so now that we understand this, I want to explain one thing that some of my patients are really blown away by. So when a woman is pregnant, if a woman has diabetes and doesn't know it, the baby can have all sorts of complications. And so it's just become routine that when a woman is pregnant, that we do something called a glucose tolerance test. Glucose tolerance. Doctor, don't I? Glucose tolerance test. And what is that? Well, this is nuts. This is crazy because a glucose tolerance test, we literally would go grab a Coke or, a soda. I don't know where you're from, what you call it, but literally would go grab a Coke, which remember I just said a while ago that it's like half of sugar here. So an adult human's pancreas only handle about 40 grams of sugar a day. Some people say 30, some people say 60, but I would put 40, 50 at the top. And if you read labels, you can see the sugar grams on food labels. Like MyFitnessPal, it like has the sugar content of just about everything. So if you give somebody 45 grams of sugar, it will cause that insulin spike to happen. And so what they do is we literally would go grab a Coke and give it to somebody, a pregnant woman, and we would check their insulin and their glucose levels at about, 1 hour intervals or, every 2 hours. Protocol is anymore. But you would look to see what their blood sugar would do and their insulin would do. So when you think about what's happening and you're giving a woman 45 grams of sugar to drink and seeing what's going to happen with their blood sugar over time, every time you drink a soda, you are literally giving your a glucose tolerance test, like a pregnant woman would get. So if you think about what your daily allowance of sugar is, let's say 40 grams of sugar, which is, I did the math on that one time. I think that was like, I want to say it was like 5 tablespoons or something like that. If you guys know, you can let me know. But every time you drink your sugar, Mikhail says adds up quickly. It absolutely does. So you have to read labels. So I highly recommend that if you are in a place where this is a challenge for you, sugar issues, low blood sugar, which low blood sugar is usually an insulin issue, then you really need to look at what you're eating, number one, what the sugar content is, and are you drinking your sugar? Because we were never meant to drink sugar. And I always say, people are like, I had a patient 2 days ago, and he was drinking cranberry juice thinking he was drinking healthy. And like, I'm like, that is like, we looked it up and it was like 40 grams of sugar. And I was like, you just had your whole daily allowance of sugar. You're giving yourself a glucose tolerance test every time you do that. So, okay, so let's see. What else did I want to talk about? So we talked about the liver, and the liver actually makes sugar, and the liver also processes your cholesterol. So we talk a lot about lipid panels. And so when you look at what a lipid panel is, cholesterol, triglycerides are actually the part of the lipid panel that are sugar-based. So it's so interesting to me that when doctors talk about cholesterol levels, like their go-to is just to put you on a statin. And it's just really interesting that they don't have the conversation about what your triglycerides are, because that impacts sugar, impacts your pancreas, which you can get pancreatitis if you have high sugar. So it's just interesting. They just want to slap you on a statin and not have the conversation about the lipid panel complex. And talking about complex, is carbs the same as sugar? 5 tablespoons is the max. Yeah, I can't remember. I have to go back. Spoons is in 40 grams of sugar, but I'm thinking that's about what it was. Okay, so the difference Oh, yeah, sugar. Oh my gosh. It's so bad. Oh, and I'm gonna talk about artificial sugars too in just a minute. Um, but the difference between a carbohydrate and a sugar or glucose is that glucose is just one of the many sugar molecules that exist. So we have, let's draw some more. Okay. So we have glucose, and then we have other sugar molecules like fructose. You've probably heard of high fructose corn syrup. And then there's other different sugars. So a 12.5 grams per tablespoon of sugar. Okay, yeah. So probably 4 or 5 tablespoons. So yeah, that's pretty close. So carbs. So I was just looking at that comment. Okay. So what I'm just going to use glucose just for simplicity's sake. And it's really funny because people talk about fructose, high fructose corn syrup, how bad it is. Fructose and glucose are really only about 5% different in the structure of their molecule. It's just how much fructose, because fructose is just a simpler sugar, and you can make, fructose from corn sugar. And so it's just so prevalent. And what's also interesting is something called the bliss point. Oh, if I draw graphs, I have to do that. They actually will start. So if you put sugar here and you put like the food, but let's say it's something like bread, you'd never even think there's sugar in it, or sausage. You don't think about sugar in these things. There's this point so let's put dollars down here. There's a point of sugar that they actually keep to food until people buy more, and it's called the bliss point. Yeah, you can look that up. That was just like really eye-opening to me. Okay, so we're talking about the difference between carbs and simple sugars. So glucose is just a sugar molecule, and a carb is a complex. So it is a sugar, it is multiple, like maybe glucose or fructose or whatever. So it's multiple sugars attached, but they're stuck together. And so your body has to break those, and it has to pull each sugar molecule away from the other one. So now you have separate sugar. So a glycemic index food is one that breaks, it's simple sugar that breaks down. So what does that really mean? Well, a complex carbohydrate with multiple sugar molecules attached is harder for your body to break down. So things like vegetables that have carbohydrates plus the fiber, it really breaks down slow. So it has the ability to slow down the sugar spikes. Remember, I drew the sugar spikes a minute ago. So things that are complex carbs, you can actually have more grams of those. So you can have like 100 grams of complex carbs because they don't break down and the glycemic index is different. A simple sugar, like the stuff you're putting in your coffee, unfortunately, is straight to your bloodstream and irritating the blood vessels and causing all sorts of problems. So definitely want to think about how you are consuming your sugar, never sugar in drinking. Bananas actually have a lot of sugar in them. So there is a little bit of difference with natural fruit sugars. They still break down into glucose and fructose and a couple other different molecules that are sugar. Oh, hello from Hawaii. How wonderful. That would be, we are really chilly. It's cold here tonight. I think it's like 50. So yeah, you're a lot warmer, warmer there, I'm sure. Yeah, thanks for sharing. But so really you can have more carbohydrates, but just because the carbohydrates are hidden in bread or something like that, or white bread, doesn't mean that those are good carbohydrates. So you have to look at kind of like good fats and bad fats. You have to look at good carbs, and sugar itself is not bad. It's just the amount that we consume. And this is crazy. I did some research for one of my shows one time, and we used to consume like less than those pink C&H bags of sugar. We used to consume 2 of those a year. And now the research is showing that we consume as like a year as Americans, each one of us consumes about 100 bags of those CNH sugar bags a year. That is crazy. And then so my TV doctor show, because it's the naked truth about health and lifestyle. But yeah, so I was in a dollar store because I was on my way to the TV studio. And I don't want to miss that question. Pancreatic cancer. Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about that in just a second, Sam and Lila. Are you Sam or Lila? Sam and Lila. And so I'm buying this stuff. And so I had like some Monster drinks and some Gatorade. And I was blown away because the cans of like sodas used to be like, like a can of soda. These cans were like almost like this big. I mean, it was just nuts. I'm like, that's what we get now. And then like sweet teas, like what are those? I can't remember the brand, but it's a famous brand like uh, oh, it's my cat's name, Sam and Lad. That's cute. Yeah, so it was just nuts how big they were. But I'm checking out and I'm talking to the lady. She's super sweet. And I had Twizzlers and I had the sodas and then I had some other stuff that I was just going to show how much sugar's in it, like just cookies or crackers or something. And I mean, it was just this like just sea of crap. Does anything look weird to you about this purchase? I said, I'm sure you see lots of people buying weird things. But I said, does anything look weird to you? And she's like, no. And it just made me realize in that moment that that is normal. And not normal, but common, how much junk people buy. So, yeah, so I hope that answers questions about what are complex carbs and what are simple sugars. Okay, so yeah, we can talk about artificial sweeteners because I know that that's something that comes up. So, yes, artificial sweeteners do not increase the blood sugar spikes like regular sugar does. However, artificial sweeteners are very, very scary to me because they were actually being studied for chemical warfare. And now, like they say, that the guy who was studying like NutraSweet and some of those aspartame and all those things, like tasted it on his hands, licked his hand or something, and it was like sweet and like I don't know who would do that when you're studying chemicals for chemical warfare. But anyway, found out that it was like sweet like sugar. Why that is legal. And there are bodies of the people who say that things are okay or not okay or approved. I mean, there are chemicals that are banned in other countries that we have here. And so these certifying bodies that say it's okay basically say that a certain amount is okay. Even if we know that it causes cancer in rats, they say, well, the average person is not using that much of it. Well, how do they know how much the average person is using? And yes, you're so right. They are addictive. And I can handle artificial sugar better than sugar alcohols. So what is handle though, and what is that really doing to your health? So, I'm open to the conversation. Just kind of think about this a little bit because those artificial sugars are tricking the brain into thinking that it's sugar because your taste buds are telling you it's sugar. Oh, stomach wise. Okay. Well, I would go back to, I know this doesn't sound fun, but I would go back to just decreasing the sugar in your diet and not using those at all. And I know that's not fun, but it's really not an alternative because sugar and the artificial sweeteners trigger your brain. They've done studies to show that they trigger your brain just like cocaine. And they've done studies in rats to show that the rats have no preference between if they'll push the button for sugar or push the button for cocaine or how often they'll do it. So literally it is that addictive. And so the problem with artificial sweeteners is they are also neurotoxins. So I've had so many patients with neuropathy that have given up. In fact, I had a lady one time, Dear patient. All my patients are like family to me, but she had neuropathy really bad. And I was trying to get her to change her diet. And, she'd say she was, but I don't know if she really was. And so she kept like her neuropathy kept getting worse. And so I try not to get into the polypharmacy. I'm a medical doctor, and sometimes I do have to write the prescription for the antibiotics or, all sorts of things. But anyway, so I didn't realize she was drinking Diet Coke because she told me she gave up the Cokes. And so her neuropathy was getting worse. And so there is tons of research to show that those artificial sweeteners are neurotoxins. So if you have neuropathy, you might listen up there. But anyway, I told her, I'm like, you have to get off those. And she kept fighting me on it, at our follow-up visits and stuff. So anyway, she wanted more and more Neurontin and gabapentin, and so I told her, do sugar-free foods and drinks have artificial sugars? Usually they do. Some of them do have things like monk fruit or the Truvia or stevia. So those are pretty much the only ones as of now. Food feed. Okay. Okay. Something that didn't like what I was saying. These are conversations, I guess that. So let me think. Okay. Yeah, I just got a notice that said that I'm talking about things that I might not should be talking. You know how that goes. But anyway, so boy, that kind of really threw me. And I actually had a live night for like saying things that they don't like. So anyway, so where were we? Oh yeah, so the sweetener. So anyway, I told this lady that, and see, that's what we're working against, right? We can't talk about this stuff, right? So therein is my point. Okay. And I'm gonna stop talking about this. So if the powers that be like, you know, don't like me, I'm just still gonna keep talking about it. I'll just yell it if I have to, even if I can't do it on social media. But anyway, um, this lady, I finally told her, I'm like, you're going to keep doing these medications unless you make those changes. And within, I don't know, within a month, her neuropathy went away. And then this is crazy. This is a God thing. I was doing research for one of my shows about sweeteners, and I had a guy with shingles, and it was like, this sort of like voice, not like audible, but it was just like, oh my gosh. So shingles is a neuropathy, like a localized neuropathy. And he had been really struggling. He wasn't getting better and he kept having these outbreaks. Shingles is basically the herpes virus that, breaks out in certain areas. And so I said, do you drink Diet Coke, so Dr. Pepper, whatever it is. And he's like, oh yeah. And so anyway, yeah, people say it's really painful. Haven't had it, knock on wood. But so I told him, I'm like, cut that out and let's see if you'll get better. And sure enough, in 2 days, his blisters were gone. So not a fan of the things I can't say, I guess. Okay, so I know we're getting close to the hour here. So I want to talk about a few other things that you might not know about. Can So candida is a yeast basically, and the yeast actually feed off sugar. So probiotics are really important that you keep the balance between the yeast and the bacteria. And so full transparency, because of my insulin resistance, I know that monk fruit and stevia may mess with my microbiome. There is always the possibility any chemical can mess up your microbiome, but so can antibiotics, so can, hormone imbalances. So, I have to get that in a little bit too. So I'm going to talk about that. But yeah, so good probiotics are important, but candida is a yeast. And so I did my candida levels one time, and I'm prone to the insulin resistance and things with the hormone stuff. And my candida levels were really high. So I had to do a cleanse. And I still take candida back, BAC, and to keep the candida low, and then try to watch the carbs. So better to use a little sugar versus artificial. Yeah, I mean, I would never use an artificial. Yeah. So I always tell people that natural honey or something like that, if you absolutely have to have something, or for baking. Um, so cortisol, yeah, adrenal stuff. We talked about brain chemistry. So some things you can do for your sugar. Um, you can eat more. I always tell women protein is so important to build muscle, especially after we're like heading towards menopause or perimenopause. And so, if you're eating more protein, I always tell people don't worry about low sugar, just worry about high protein. Try to get at least 100 grams of protein a day. If you're eating all that chicken and those eggs, you're not going to have room for the pie, right? Or not as much pie. So, I think that's a good strategy. Monk fruit sweetener says erythritol. So is it natural or not? Erythritol is kind of on the fence whether it is sort of what we would call a natural sugar, but I really like monk fruit's okay, and stevia and trivia. This is our fruits and greens on our shop Hormone Bliss site. And I love this stuff. My son loves this. And so if you have kids that like the sweet drinks, this has like fruits and greens. It's like all your servings of fruits and greens for the day. And I remember when I first private labeled this, my son, I knew what he was going to say when he mixed this up. It's a powder, but it's got probiotics in it too, which is really cool. Oh, thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. But it's got probiotics in it and just all sorts of nutrients, but it is flavored with monk fruit. Monk fruit is usually for things that are fruity, because you wouldn't want to use monk fruit in brownies because it's kind of got that fruit flavor to it. But yeah, this is pretty cool. And so if you want something sweet, that's what we use. Okay. So where were we? So more protein. Gut health, we talked about probiotics and the bacteria, because that candida is the yeast is going to crave the sugar. Um, Supplements, things like, and I just said I had cinnamon in my tea. So berberine and white kidney bean are amazing for helping with the sugar cravings. And also, sometimes if you're craving sugar, like chocolate or something, that can actually be a nutrient deficiency, like magnesium. And we're extremely magnesium deficient society. So it's kind of fun if you ever want to go look up nutrient deficiencies with different food cravings. Like if your iron is low, I've even heard of eating dirt chips because they're trying to get the iron out of the dirt. So cravings are interesting. So if you crave a certain thing, maybe just take a minute and Google it and look up what that could be that you're missing. And then, so I want to talk about meds just a little bit. Okay, so we talked just a minute ago about metformin. So metformin or glucophage is well known as a diabetic medication. And there's a lot of research for anti-aging for metformin. I did say dirt chips. Yeah. Yeah. Ice chips too, for a weird reason. I don't know why pregnant women crave ice chips in pregnancy, but anyway, it's a thing. So we're talking about prescription meds. So metformin works ways. It blocks cases can't take it. It blocks the absorption of carbs, but so does white kidney beans. So that might be something you might try if you can't take metformin. And there are a lot of head-to-head studies that show it's almost as effective. So as metformin. So metformin works in two ways. It the gut, which is why it causes a stomach upset, to actually block the sugar absorption, kind of like those Olestra chips. They used to have that stuff that, basically the fats wouldn't break down and they just go right through you. Yeah, pica, you're exactly right. Iron deficiency. Craving dirt. It's clay. Yeah, it's a thing. So it blocks the sugar absorption in the gut, and it also works on those receptors. Remember, I showed you the lock and key a while ago, and it helps with instance. And sometimes if this is a good choice for you, if you use extended release, it can actually cause less of the nausea and stuff. And there's a bunch of other diabetic meds and stuff. There's also the semaglutide, which are the GLPs, and we use some in our office. like Mounjaro, Ozempic, all those guys, and they work very similar to this too. But if you want to just try natural stuff, and I used to actually sell this on my website, but these can be really helpful for blocking sugar. So I want to talk a little bit about menopause because that's what you guys come here for most of the time. And so when we talk about insulin, we have to talk about estrogen because the ovaries actually make something called androgens, which can convert back and forth into estrogen. Because remember, I always say cholesterol turns into estrogen and progesterone. I'm writing really messy, and testosterone. And so some of these androgens, as they are competing, actually can affect your blood sugar. And so with menopause, one of the things that happens is now, the side pathway is cortisol. And cortisol, if you've ever had a cortisone shot or you've taken prednisone, it makes you crave sugar. So this is the connection between ovarian hormones, cortisol, and insulin, because when you crave sugar, you eat more sugar and then you produce more insulin. So it's sort of this vicious cycle. So we could kind of almost do this, arrows, arrows, arrows. So after menopause, when you don't have estrogen anymore, now your insulin resistance goes up and you crave more sugar. And that's why women after menopause during period, their progesterone starts dropping. And this is all just a hot mess. And so that's one of the things that I see as well. And I have to get this in because I don't like the word menopause. And I don't like the word menopause because the definition of menopause is just a year without periods. That means absolutely nothing. But what we are dealing with, if we go birth to 100, and menopause usually happens about 50, here's your hormones on this axis. I'm just going to do H for hormones. And you start having hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, here, here, here. And then literally your ovaries run out of eggs. Eggs are something you make every month to get fertilized, make a baby, and you have a fine number. And when those run out, you literally flatline. So the problem is not a year without periods. The problem is ovarian failure. This happens, your ovaries do not produce estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, pregnenolone, all the things. And then your insulin is out of whack and your thyroid goes out of whack. It's just an absolute hormonal mess. And you are moody because you have low blood sugar and then you're not sleeping. And so people think that postmenopausal or women in ovarian failure are crazy, and it's all hormones. And so I always say, people say, how long are you going to take your hormones? And I say, until science figures out a way to regrow, because if you didn't have a thyroid, would they deny you thyroid hormone? But we don't have ovaries, and they tell us you can't have it. It causes cancer. But yet women here get much less cancer than women with no ovarian hormones. And it's just clown world. And yet they can put a 9-year-old girl on birth control, synthetic hormones, and say, here you go, no problem, no informed consent, no nothing, here, take it, it'll clear up your acne. Yeah, Michaela says, preach. I know. And that's why I have to drink tea, because I start getting so animated. But I love you guys, and you're my tribe, and thank you for letting me preach. But it is just clown world that we are told, and we won't break that down because I know we only have 2 minutes left, but that have hormones and we need them more than ever. And if you use bioidentical, topical, it is so safe and so protective. And you can prevent all the diseases that can happen out here. You can help your insulin resistance. I'll tell you, I don't worry about what I eat. Now, I'm in moderation, right? But because my hormones are balanced and bioidentical creams, and I also do troches and stuff, but because they're balanced, too much. So yeah, Sam Sarah says full host. Yes, yes, yes. So I talk about this every night. I'm here every night at 7. So you guys come back and join me. Tell your friends, share this. I'll always post the live replays usually, or post the live replays. So go back and watch them or share that with your friends. And I've the time too. But I do want to tell you, if you can't get anybody to test your estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone, because it's clown world and they'll tell you you don't need to. But if you have endometriosis, PCOS, perimenopause, estrogen dominance, or you're postmenopausal or in that phase of postmenopause, and in ovarian failure, please, please, please check your hormones. And yes, amazing. Check your hormones. Is this cool? They're only $119 right now, and we're running a Christmas special, and they're normally like $300, $299. So it's special now. So go to hormonebliss.com and order a kit. And one of our hormone experts, this is my passion project. I can branch out and go all over the place. Bought one 2 nights ago. Yay, yay. So yeah, blood work, if you go check these things with blood work at your doctor, if you can get them to check, is probably $500. So it's a really good deal. Plus, it's included order tests. Yay, yay, yay. So it's a really good deal, and you can do it at home, and you'll have to ask the doctor's permission. And then one of our experts will get on, and then we can talk about getting you on some bioidentical hormones, which is wonderful. And what day of cycle is best to do blood work. People ask me that all the time, and I always say it doesn't really matter, because there is a calculator called and we can calculate for estrogen dominance. So even if you're in the follicular phase or the luteal phase, we still look at the estrogen to progesterone ratio. So it doesn't really, but there are some people that say you want to do it in a certain, phase. But as long as we know, if there's too much estrogen, that's really all we need to know. Or if you're postmenopausal in ovarian failure, you won't have any. So we can find that too. So it's all about you feeling better. Don't let them gaslight you. Don't suffer. We can help. And my goal before I leave this, I call it the carbon experience, is to have 50% of women at least aware some form of bioidentical hormones, because they are a game changer. And every day in clinic, I live for this. Women tell me, you have changed my life. And I am coming to you with the biggest heart, because I wouldn't keep doing this if it didn't make so much of a change. And I wouldn't be so passionate about it and preach it if I really didn't feel like this information needs to get out there. So please share it. Please don't use the word menopause anymore. Please use the word ovarian failure, and get the word out that it's just like you don't have a thyroid. I need some thyroid hormones. Women deserve to feel good. This is a time in our lives. I'm 55. Without my hormones, I would be just in bed, probably, especially because I had problems my whole life. So this is the time that you should feel good. This is the time your weight should be balanced, that your blood sugar should be balanced. This is the time that you should be looking forward to grandkids and all the things, and playing with them, and have energy, and have good skin and good hair. This is the time. So don't let them gaslight you and make you feel like you're crazy, or that lab testing isn't important, or that hormones are dangerous. So anyway, okay, I'm done preaching. Now I'm going to go rest my voice and drink my tea. I love you all very much. And I'm here every night at 7. So if you're free, I'll see you tomorrow night.